Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping back in time, not to a grand ball or a bustling marketplace, but to a much more intimate setting, the Victorian bath. Imagine, for a moment, the faint scent of coal smoke clinging to your clothes, the pervasive dust of horse-drawn carriages settling on every surface, and the distinct, often robust, aroma of a world before daily showers. You're standing on a cobbled street, the gas lamps casting long, flickering shadows, and you can practically feel the grit between your toes, even through your sturdy boots. This wasn't a world of instant hot water or pristine porcelain tubs. Oh no, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you right now. And hey, if you're enjoying the historical vibes, like and follow the channel to keep waiting for the next exciting parts. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just arrived home, perhaps from a long day at the mill, or perhaps from a brisk walk through London's famously fog-choked streets. The chill has seeped into your bones, and your body feels coated in a fine layer of urban grime. You peel off your gloves, noticing the faint black residue on your fingertips, a testament to the Industrial Revolution's less glamorous side. The air inside your humble abode, while warmer than outside, still carries the scent of damp wool and aged timber. Your muscles ache, not from a strenuous workout at the gym. Of course, gyms as we know them are still a twinkle in some forward-thinking Victorian's eye, but from the sheer physical effort of daily life. Even if you're of the leisured class, a stroll through Hyde Park on a particularly damp day would leave you feeling less than fresh. This isn't a quick dash into a steaming shower, not by a long shot. The very notion of showering for personal hygiene is still largely associated with therapeutic treatments in sanatoriums, not daily home practice. No, what awaits you is a far more involved, often laborious, affair. Think of your modern bathroom gleaming tiles, chrome fixtures, an endless supply of hot water at the turn of a tap. Now erase that image completely. Your Victorian bathroom, if you're fortunate enough to have a dedicated space, is likely rudimentary. More often, your bathing area is simply wherever a portable tub can be set up, perhaps in the kitchen near the stove, or even in your bedroom, shielded by a privacy screen. Historians still argue whether the Victorians were truly obsessed with cleanliness, or if it was more about appearing clean for social decorum. What is undeniable, however, is that achieving that appearance of cleanliness was a significant undertaking. You might scoff at the idea of a weekly bath, but trust me, by the time you finished one, you'll understand why it wasn't a daily indulgence. The sheer logistical puzzle of a Victorian bath would make even the most dedicated modern minimalist raise an eyebrow. The day's grime, that gritty film of Victorian life, truly begins to settle as you kick off your boots by the hearth. You can practically feel the coal dust that permeated every fiber of urban existence, clinging to your eyelashes, settling in the creases of your clothes. If you'd been out in the countryside, perhaps visiting a relative or overseeing your estate, it wouldn't be coal dust, but rather the fine, ubiquitous chalk dust from unpaved roads, or the sticky mud from a sudden downpour. Either way, you're not exactly feeling fresh as a daisy. Your hands, once gloved, now feel rough, a little chapped from the cold, and definitely not soft. You might run a tentative finger across the mantelpiece and see a thin layer of soot, a visual echo of what has been accumulating on your skin all day. Your hair, if you're a lady with an elaborate updo, feels heavy, perhaps a bit limp from the humidity, or stiff with product and the day's atmospheric fallout. If you're a gentleman, your neatly slicked back hair might now feel a touch greasy, attracting stray fibers and dust bunnies like a magnet. Remember how simple it is for us to just step into a shower, turn a knob, and poof, hot water. For you, the Victorian, the very concept of instant anything, especially instant hot water, is pure science fiction. The reality of your return home isn't about immediate refreshment. It's about acknowledging the pervasive feeling of being unclean. It's a sense of stickiness on your neck, a faint smell of horse manure from the street that seems to have followed you inside. And perhaps, if you've been working outdoors, the earthy scent of honest labor. You peel off your outer layers, perhaps a heavy wool overcoat, feeling the weight of the fabric and the accumulated chill it carried. Even your undergarments, while shielding you somewhat, don't prevent the fine particles from migrating. You might even find yourself instinctively brushing at your shoulders, trying to dislodge the invisible motes that irritate your skin. It's a subtle yet constant reminder that you are a creature of your environment, and your environment, for all its grand architectural statements and burgeoning industrial might, is also quite mucky. This sensation of dirt isn't just about appearance. It's a very real physical discomfort. Your skin feels clammy in some places, dry and itchy in others. Your eyes might feel a little gritty from the street dust, prompting you to rub them, only to spread the irritation. There's no quick fix, no splash of water from a convenient tap. The nearest water source might be a cold water pump in the backyard or a hand-cranked well. Bringing that water indoors and then heating it is where the real adventure begins. You might find yourself sighing, a soft, weary sound, as you contemplate the evening's necessary ritual. It's not a luxurious indulgence, not in the way we might think of a spa day. It's a practical necessity, a battle against the elements and the inescapable byproducts of life in the 19th century. Historians still argue whether the Victorians truly feared disease from dirt, or if their cleanliness drive was more about middle-class aspiration and moral purity. What is clear, however, is that the feeling of being dirty was an undeniable part of daily existence, a physical weight that needed to be shed, and that shedding, my friend, is where our journey truly begins. You feel it now, don't you? That slight itch, that faint film, that undeniable desire for a good scrub. And so, the grand, almost mythical undertaking of heating water for your bath begins. You won't be strolling to a thermostat and dialing up the heat, nor will you be flicking a switch for an instantaneous electric kettle. No, this is a meticulous, time-consuming process that often involves half the household, or at least a very patient servant. Imagine the scullery, likely a dimly lit, practical space with stone floors that always feel a little damp. Here, the primary heating source for most middle-class homes would be the kitchen range, a formidable cast-iron beast that dominates one wall. It's an all-in-one marvel of Victorian engineering, designed for cooking, heating the room, and, crucially for you, heating water. But it's not an instant gratification machine. First, the fire in the range must be stoked. You or a servant would meticulously lay coal and kindling, perhaps blowing gently on the embers until a cheerful, if somewhat smoky flame takes hold. This isn't a quick burst. It's a slow, deliberate build, often taking a good hour or more to get the range to a sufficient temperature. Once the fire is roaring, or at least heartily glowing, the real work begins. Water, which you or a servant would have laboriously carried in from an outdoor pump or perhaps a communal tap down the street, now needs to be transferred to the largest available vessels. Think copper boilers, hefty bulbous pots that sit directly on the hot plate of the range. Or perhaps you have a slightly more advanced system with a back boiler integrated into the range itself. A metal tank heated by the fire with a spigot to draw off the hot water. Even then, the flow is slow and the quantity limited. If you're of a truly modest income, the process is even more fundamental. You might have nothing more than a few large iron pots simmering on an open fireplace, suspended from a crane over the flames. This method, while archaic even by Victorian standards, was still common in poorer households. The air fills with the steamy scent of heating water, mingled with the earthy smell of coal smoke and perhaps a hint of whatever stew was cooking earlier. You find yourself hovering, perhaps stirring a pot with a long ladle, checking the temperature with a cautious finger, a far cry from the digital thermometers of today. The water isn't going to be uniformly hot, mind you. You'll have scalding hot water at the bottom of the boiler and cooler water at the top, leading to a precarious balancing act when mixing. And you need or should require a latkuner of water. A full bath isn't just a few buckets. It's often 20 to 30 gallons, each gallon lovingly carried and heated. That's a minimum of 4 or 5 large boilers full, likely more, especially if more than one family member plans to bathe. This meticulous heating process is also where you hear faint creaks and groans from the pipes. If your home is lucky enough to have any rudimentary internal plumbing, even then, these pipes are often exposed, susceptible to freezing in winter, and certainly not designed for the instantaneous delivery we expect. It's a physical manifestation of effort, a quiet symphony of domestic labor that underscores the value placed on cleanliness when it required such an investment of time and energy. Historians still argue whether the invention of the continuous flow gas water heater in the late 19th century was a bigger game changer for hygiene than the introduction of public sanitation systems. It certainly made the personal bathing experience infinitely more accessible. But for now, you wait. You watch the steam rise, you feel the radiating heat from the range, and you anticipate the sheer effort involved in carefully transporting that precious hot liquid to your chosen bathing spot. This isn't just water, it's a testament to patience, ingenuity, and a little bit of sweat equity. With the colossal task of water heating underway, you now turn your attention to the primitive bathroom itself, or more accurately, the space that will become your bathroom for the next hour or so. Forget the pristine, tiled sanctuary you might envision from a period drama. For most Victorians, even those of comfortable means, a dedicated, fully plumbed bathroom was a rarity, a true luxury reserved for the very wealthy and only towards the later part of the century. You likely find yourself in a bedroom, perhaps your own, or a less frequently used guest room. The furniture has been pushed back, creating a cleared space in the center. The flooring is probably bare wood, perhaps covered by a simple rug that will soon be rolled away to avoid water damage. This isn't a room designed for splashes and steam. The wallpaper, if there is any, might be peeling slightly from past encounters with moisture. In the corner, or perhaps pulled out from under a bed, is the star of the show, our portable bathtub. This is not a sleek, lightweight fiberglass tub. Oh no, this is often a hefty, cumbersome contraption, typically made of zinc or tin, sometimes painted to resemble wood grain. It might have a rolled rim for comfort, but it's generally a utilitarian, no-frills vessel. Imagine trying to maneuver something akin to a large, metallic coffin on legs into position, especially if you're doing it yourself. It might even have a little stopper at the bottom for drainage, leading to a bucket placed underneath, a charming detail that highlights the complete lack of floor drains. Around this temporary bathing station, you might see other essential implements. A worn, wooden stool to hold a basin for washing your face and hands before the full immersion. Perhaps a small, rickety screen, a modesty screen, placed strategically if you have servants or other family members likely to pass through the room. This screen isn't for keeping heat in. It's purely for preserving one's delicate sensibilities from the scandalous sight of an ankle, or heaven forbid, a shoulder. It's an almost comical nod to Victorian prudishness, even in the privacy of one's own home. The lighting in this makeshift sanctuary is dim. A gas lamp on the wall or a strategically placed oil lamp casts flickering shadows, making the room feel more cavernous and less inviting. There are no bright overhead lights, no vanity mirrors with perfect illumination. You're bathing in a soft, perhaps even a little spooky, glow. The air, initially cool, will soon begin to fill with the rising steam from the hot water, lending a faint, comforting warmth, but also a pervasive dampness. You might glance around and notice the sheer improvisation of it all. There's no ventilation fan, so the walls will inevitably sweat. The window, likely a sash window, offers little in the way of climate control beyond letting in a bracing draft. This sparse, practical setup emphasizes just how much effort went into this simple act of personal hygiene. It wasn't a relaxing soak in a beautifully appointed space. It was a mission, a necessary purification ritual. Historians still argue whether the idea of a dedicated bathroom as a specialized room truly took hold due to health concerns or simply as a result of burgeoning middle-class aspirations for domestic convenience and luxury. Either way, for now, you stand in what is, for all intents and purposes, a multi-purpose room temporarily transformed. You might even find yourself chuckling faintly at the thought of explaining this setup to a modern friend, who might well declare it an absolute nightmare. But for you, it's just bath night. As you survey your improvised bathing chamber, you might spot some truly unusual contraptions lurking in the corners of Victorian ingenuity. These weren't just simple tubs. They were often elaborate, sometimes bizarre, answers to the era's emerging obsession with hygiene and health. Forget your sleek, minimalist showerhead. You're about to encounter the equivalent of a Rube Goldberg machine for personal cleanliness. One such marvel you might own, or at least have seen advertised in the pages of Punch magazine, is the Sitz bath, not for full immersion. Oh no, this was a small, hip-shaped tub designed specifically for bathing the lower body. Think of it as a bidet's rather clunky, over-engineered ancestor. The idea was that a partial bath was more efficacious or perhaps less shocking to the system than a full one. You might even have a small tap on it, connected to a tank above, allowing for a gentle, localized stream of water. It seems terribly inefficient to our modern sensibilities, but to the Victorians, it was a specialized tool for specific hygienic needs. Then there's the hip bath, a slightly larger, oval-shaped basin, often made of copper or tin, designed for you to sit in rather than lie down. It was essentially a deep, wide basin that you'd fill with water, allowing for a seated wash. These were particularly popular for daily ablutions when a full, laborious bath was out of the question. You'd perch uncomfortably, often with knees drawn up, swishing water with a sponge. The sheer lack of space for proper scrubbing in these contraptions would make you appreciate the expansive real estate of your current shower cubicle. But the real oddities often surfaced in the realm of therapeutic bathing devices. Imagine a precursor to your modern power shower, but powered by gravity and a whole lot of effort. These were often called the portable shower baths, or in douches. They consisted of a tall, sometimes ornate metal stand with a large tank at the top, a pipe descending to a perforated rose, the showerhead equivalent, and a small basin at the bottom to catch the runoff. You or a servant would manually fill the top tank, often requiring a ladder or a very strong arm. The water would then cascade down over you, providing a rather rudimentary, often cold, shower. It was less about relaxation and more about invigoration, often prescribed for ailments from nervous disorders to general malaise. Historians still argue whether these early showers were more about genuine health benefits or simply a fashionable adoption of hydrotherapy principles. You might also encounter foot baths, small dedicated basins for soaking tired feet after a long day of walking on uneven cobblestones. These were practical, certainly, but still required heating water just for your lower extremities. And let's not forget the ingenious, if cumbersome, devices for heating water in the tub itself, like the Monte coil heater. A metal coil placed into the water and then connected to a stove or fire to conduct heat. It was slow, inefficient, and arguably a bit dangerous, but it was an option when boilers weren't enough. These peculiar bathing contraptions highlight a period of transition where the desire for cleanliness and well-being was rapidly evolving, but the technology to achieve it conveniently was still catching up. You might chuckle at the sheer effort involved in using some of these gadgets, but in their time they represented innovation, an earnest attempt to bring comfort and hygiene to daily life. It's a testament to the Victorian spirit of invention, even if some of their ideas seem more fit for a museum than a modern home. Now, let's talk about the cornerstone of Victorian bathing culture for many the Saturday night tradition. This wasn't just a bath, it was the bath. a weekly ritual etched into the fabric of domestic life, a societal norm as rigid as tea time itself. You see, the idea of daily bathing, or even bathing every other day, was largely considered an extravagance, a luxury of time, effort, and precious heated water that few could afford or justify. So, as the week drew to a close, a subtle shift occurred in your household. The air, perhaps on a Friday afternoon, would start to hum with anticipation. The scullery maid, or perhaps your diligent spouse, would begin the slow process of moving the necessary equipment. The large metal bath, often stored in a shed or discreet corner of the house, would be carefully brought in. Buckets would be readied, sponges located, and the various soaps and toiletries, which we'll delve into later, would be laid out. This weekly full immersion was not just about personal hygiene, it was a deeply ingrained social custom. You were expected to present a clean appearance for Sunday church services, for family visits, or for any polite society engagements. It was a demarcation line, a cleansing of the week's accumulated grime, both literal and perhaps metaphorical. Historians still argue whether this weekly ritual stemmed more from practical limitations of water and heating or from a moralistic view that cleanliness is next to godliness, making Sunday presentation paramount. For many families, especially those of the working and middle classes, the Saturday night bath was a communal affair, though perhaps not in the way you might imagine. It wasn't a shared tub at the same time. Heaven forbid instead, it was a sequential operation. The father, as the patriarch, often had the first dip in the freshly heated, relatively clean water. Then, perhaps, the mother would follow. After that, the children would take their turn, often sharing the same water, starting with the youngest and progressing to the oldest. You can practically hear the subtle grimaces as the water grew progressively cooler and, well, less pristine. Imagine the logistics. The large bathtub, often placed in front of the kitchen fire for warmth, becomes the family's central point of focus. The younger children, splashed and giggling, are probably having the most fun, oblivious to the rapidly cooling, soap-scummed water. You, as an older child or adult, might be less enthusiastic, bracing yourself for the lukewarm reality. "Don't splash, dear. We need this for your brother," your mother might admonish. It was an exercise in resource management, a lesson in economy. Every drop of hot water was precious, every bucketful a testament to diligent effort. This tradition extended across social strata, albeit with different levels of comfort. While a wealthy household might have multiple portable tubs and ample hot water for each individual, the timing of the weekly bath remained a common thread. It was about preparing for the Sabbath, about shedding the working week and stepping into a new, cleaner one. It cemented a sense of order, of routine, in a rapidly changing industrial world. You might even catch a faint, almost nostalgic whiff of carbolic soap in the air as the last bather finally emerges, wrapped in a rough towel, ready for a well-deserved, if sometimes chilly, night's rest. With Saturday night looming, the atmosphere in your Victorian home shifts from the general hum of daily life to the focused intensity of moina, bath day preparations. This isn't a spontaneous decision, it's a planned event, a logistical ballet that requires coordination and effort. Whether you're orchestrating it yourself or delegating to diligent household staff, the first crucial step, beyond the monumental task of heating water we've already discussed, is the placement of the tub. Your portable tin or zinc bathtub, likely weighing a considerable amount even when empty, needs to be brought from its storage place. Perhaps it's been tucked away in a utility room, a dusty corner of the scullery, or even in the garden shed if space is truly at a premium. Hauling it into the designated bathing area, often the kitchen for its warmth, or a large bedroom, is no small feat. You might find yourself grunting with effort, or directing a servant to carefully maneuver it through narrow doorways, trying not to scuff the paintwork. "Mind the skirting, dear," you might exclaim, as the metal clangs against the doorframe. Once the tub is positioned, typically on a protective cloth or mat to spare your floors from inevitable splashes. The next phase begins the ready lining of the tub. This isn't just for comfort, though a cold metal tub isn't exactly inviting. More importantly, it's about preserving the precious hot water and preventing your skin from coming into direct contact with the often unadorned metal. You'd likely use a large apron linen sheet or a specialized chamois bath towel, so carefully laid out to cover the bottom and sides of the tub. It creates a softer barrier and, theoretically, makes the bath feel a little less like bathing in a glorified watering trough. Then come the accessories. A sturdy wooden stool or chair is positioned nearby, ready to hold your sponge, soap, and perhaps a small jug of cooler water for rinsing or tempering the main bath. A stack of clean, rough linen towels would be laid out, often warmed near the fire if you're lucky enough to have such a luxury. These aren't the fluffy terry cloth towels, you know. They're more akin to stout dishcloths, designed for vigorous scrubbing and quick drying. You might also prepare your toiletries. A bar of hard, often strongly scented carbolic or yellow soap would be placed on a small dish. Perhaps a bottle of rose water for a final rinse, or a small pot of pomade for your hair. These items, though humble by modern standards, represent the peak of available personal care. The air would start to fill with the anticipation of clean, a faint scent of soap mingling with the lingering warmth from the range. The overall atmosphere is one of methodical preparation. There's a certain solemnity to it, a recognition that this is a significant event. You're not just taking a bath, you're orchestrating a small domestic operation. It's a testament to the fact that while the Victorians embraced the idea of cleanliness, the practice of it was still a manual, labor-intensive affair. Historians still argue whether the elaborate nature of these preparations contributed to the infrequent nature of bathing, or if the infrequent bathing simply necessitated such thorough preparation. Either way, as the heated water begins its journey from the boiler to the tub, you feel a sense of satisfaction, knowing that soon the week's accumulation will be washed away. As the vast, steaming quantities of water are carefully decanted from the copper boilers into your makeshift bathtub, you truly begin to appreciate the concept of limited water supply. This isn't about conservation in an ecological sense. It's about the sheer physical effort and cost involved in getting that water to you, warm and ready. Every single drop is precious, a commodity earned through sweat and often considerable expense. Imagine the procession buckets, often heavy galvanized iron or even wooden pails, are carefully carried from the kitchen range to your bathing spot. The person carrying them, whether it's you, a sturdy housemaid, or a dutiful child, moves with an almost ceremonial slowness, trying desperately not to slosh the scalding contents onto the floor, or, worse, onto themselves. The air fills with steam, thick and humid, fogging the windows and creating a warm, enveloping cloud. You can practically hear the subtle hiss as the hot water meets the slightly cooler metal of the tub, causing it to expand with a groan. You watch as the water level slowly rises in the tub, a tangible representation of the time and energy invested. There's no turning a tap to increase the flow if you misjudge the amount needed. Once those buckets are emptied, that's largely it. You've got what you've got. This finite nature means there's no lingering under a long, hot spray, no indulgent top-ups. Your bath is a measured affair, a utilitarian act rather than a prolonged soak. The water, too, might not be perfectly clear. Depending on your source, it could have a faint brownish tint from residual sediment if it came from a well or river, or perhaps a slight metallic tang if it traveled through older lead pipes, a hidden danger the Victorians were only beginning to truly understand. You might even find a stray leaf or a tiny piece of soot floating on the surface, remnants of its journey from source to stove to tub. These imperfections, far from being a cause for complaint, are simply accepted as part of the reality of bath day. The temperature is another delicate balancing act. Remember all those separate boilers. You're not just pouring in uniformly hot water. You might have one bucket that's almost boiling, another that's merely warm, The art is in combining them to achieve a comfortable, albeit brief, bathing temperature. You might test it cautiously with your elbow, a trick passed down through generations, trying to gauge if it's just right, not too scalding, not too tepid. This limited quantity of hot water also means that subsequent bathers, as part of that Saturday night ritual, are in for an increasingly lukewarm and admittedly less pristine experience. Historians still argue whether the limited availability of hot water was a primary driver for the development of public baths, or if public baths arose more from a broader social reform movement aimed at improving the hygiene of the working classes who lacked even basic facilities at home. Whatever the cause, this precious water highlights the stark contrast with our modern world of seemingly endless, on-demand hot water. For you, the Victorian, this tub full of warm water is a luxury, a hard-won victory over the elements, and a symbol of deliberate effort for cleanliness. With your body immersed, or at least partially immersed, in the precious, hard-won bathwater, your thoughts might drift to another aspect of Victorian hygiene that differed vastly from our own, the less frequent and unique methods of hair washing. For you, a good head of hair was a crown, a statement, and certainly not something to be drenched daily. The very idea of washing your hair as frequently as you wash your body would seem utterly bewildering, if not downright wasteful of that limited hot water. Daily hair washing, as we know it, simply didn't exist. For one, shampoo as a specialized product was still in its infancy, often sold as a powder to be mixed with water. For another, the elaborate hairstyles of the era, particularly for women, were monumental undertakings. Imagine the intricate plaits, the careful curls, the sheer volume of hairpins and padding required to create those towering edifices. Dismantling such a creation for a wash, only to rebuild it, was a labor of love for special occasions, not a casual evening routine. So, how did one keep one's tresses presentable? Well, for starters, brushing was paramount. You'd likely possess a sturdy boar bristle brush and a fine-toothed comb, used daily, sometimes several times a day, to distribute the natural oils, remove dust, and keep the hair looking somewhat lustrous. This wasn't just a quick run-through. It was a vigorous, almost meditative process designed to clean and stimulate the scalp. You might even use a special hairbrush cleaner, a small, stiff brush specifically for dislodging the accumulated dust and shed hairs from your main brush. When a proper wash was deemed necessary, perhaps once a month or even less frequently, it was an event. It wouldn't happen during your main bath, necessarily, unless you were truly committing to a full overhaul. More often, it involved bending over a basin, having someone pour warm, sometimes very warm, water over your scalp. The shampoo might be a simple mixture of soap flakes dissolved in water, or perhaps an infusion of herbs like rosemary or lavender for scent. Lathering was often minimal, and rinsing was an arduous process, requiring multiple jugs of clear water to avoid leaving soap residue, which could make the hair dull and sticky. For those with means, a lady's maid might perform this ritual, carefully scrubbing the scalp with her fingertips, then patiently rinsing. For others, it was a family affair, with siblings or a spouse assisting. The drying process was equally laborious. No hair dryers, of course. Your hair would be wrapped in a towel, then allowed to air dry, often by a warm fire, for hours. This is why many women, particularly those with long, thick hair, preferred to wash their hair on a non-social day, like a laundry day, when they could afford the hours for it to completely dry. Quirky tidbit. Some Victorians believed that washing hair too frequently could lead to brain fevers or even madness. The scalp, they thought, needed its natural oils for protection. This fear, while unfounded, certainly contributed to the less frequent washing habits. Historians still argue whether the infrequent hair washing led to more prevalent scalp conditions, or if the strong, often harsh, soaps used mitigated some of these issues. But for now, as you sit in your bath, you probably just give your scalp a quick scrub with a wet sponge, leaving the deeper clean for another, more dedicated day. Now that you're settled in your bath, however rudimentary, let's consider some of the more fascinating and sometimes baffling beliefs surrounding water itself in the Victorian era, its aqueous medicinal claims. For them, water wasn't just for cleaning, it was a potent therapeutic agent, a cure all capable of everything from soothing nerves to banishing consumption. This was the golden age of hydrotherapy, where water, in all its forms, was prescribed with almost religious fervor. You might have heard of, or even been encouraged to partake in, the water cure. This wasn't a gentle soak. Oh no, this was a rigorous regimen involving a variety of watery tortures, all designed for your supposed good. Imagine being wrapped in cold, wet sheets until your body reacted by warming them up, known as the water conweta pack, or perhaps having jets of freezing water directed at specific parts of your anatomy in what was termed a douche again, not the kind you're thinking of, but a focused stream. The idea was to shock the system, stimulate circulation, and purge toxins. You might shiver just thinking about it. Many believe that water, particularly mineral springs, held mystical healing properties. People would flock to spa towns like Bath or Harrogate, not just for a leisurely holiday, but to take the waters. You'd be encouraged to drink vast quantities of the often foul-tasting, mineral-rich water, believing it could cure anything from indigestion to gout. Some of these waters were indeed rich in sulfur or iron, giving them distinct smells and flavors that would make modern bottled water seem like nectar. A bit like drinking rotten eggs. But for your liver, darling, you might hear a fellow spa-goer chirp. Beyond internal consumption, the external application of water was equally varied. Cold plunges were touted for their invigorating effects, believed to strengthen the nervous system and build resilience. You might even consider a Worsitz bath. Remember those hip-shaped tubs specifically for its claimed benefits in treating various female complaints or ailments of the digestive system? Hot baths, while less common for their curative properties than cold ones, were still used to induce sweating, thought to expel impurities from the body. The enthusiasm for hydrotherapy stemmed partly from a growing disillusionment with traditional medical practices, which often involved harsh purgatives or questionable elixirs. Water, in contrast, seemed natural, pure, and less likely to cause immediate harm. Doctors like Dr. James Gully at Malvern promoted elaborate water cures, attracting patients from all walks of life, including famous figures seeking relief from chronic illnesses. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of hydrotherapy were largely due to the placebo effect and the generally healthier lifestyle encouraged at these establishments, or if there were genuine physiological advantages to some of the treatments. As you sit in your bath, you might reflect on these curious beliefs. While your current bath is for simple hygiene, the overarching belief in water's power permeates the air. You might even find yourself subconsciously believing that this warm water is not just cleansing your skin, but perhaps, just perhaps, washing away a few of the week's minor aches and anxieties. After all, if it's good enough for an ailing duke, it's certainly good enough for you. Stepping out of the quiet intimacy of your private or semi-private bathing ritual, let's cast our gaze outwards to a grander scale of Victorian hygiene, the rise of public baths. For a significant portion of the population, particularly the burgeoning working class crowded into industrial cities, the luxury of even a portable tub and heated water was an unimaginable extravagance. Their homes often lacked plumbing entirely, and access to clean water for washing was severely limited. This stark reality gave birth to a remarkable social reform movement. You see, as cities swelled with migrants from the countryside, eager for factory work, the living conditions deteriorated rapidly. Tenements were overcrowded, sanitation was appalling, and disease, particularly cholera and typhus, ran rampant. Philanthropists, social reformers, and increasingly, concerned municipal authorities began to realize that public health was not just a matter of individual choice, but a societal imperative. A dirty populace was a sick populace, and sickness affected everyone, rich or poor. This growing awareness led to the establishment of public baths and washhouses, often funded by local councils or charitable donations. The first true public bath in England opened in Liverpool in 1842, a pioneering effort. Imagine walking past one of these imposing red brick buildings, often designed with a sense of civic pride, bearing grand inscriptions proclaiming their purpose. Inside, it was a hive of activity, a far cry from your quiet personal bath. These institutions offered not just baths but also laundry facilities, providing a vital service to women who otherwise had to wash clothes in rivers or communal pumps. For a small fee, often just a penny or two, a person could get a private cubicle with a rudimentary tub, a supply of warm water often heated efficiently by a central boiler, and a clean towel and soap. This wasn't a leisurely sway experience. It was efficient, functional, and immensely popular. The demand often far outstripped the supply, with queues forming daily. You might imagine the cacophony, the splashing of water, the chatter of voices, the rhythmic scrubbing of laundry in the wash houses. It was a utilitarian approach to hygiene, focused on providing basic necessities. The baths were typically individual cubicles, ensuring a degree of privacy, a nod to Victorian sensibilities even in a communal setting. Cleanliness for the masses proclaimed the reformers. And indeed, it was. These public baths became vital community hubs, not just for hygiene, but also for social interaction. They were places where people from different walks of life, though primarily the working class, could gather, exchange news, and briefly escape the confines of their cramped homes. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation behind the public bath movement was genuine philanthropic concern for public health, or a more paternalistic desire to instill middle-class values of cleanliness and order among the working poor. Whatever the underlying intent, their impact was profound. They reduced disease transmission, improved living standards, and offered a semblance of dignity through the simple act of a clean wash. You might even feel a sense of civic pride passing one, knowing that such an institution was working to uplift the general well-being of your city. Having explored the practicalities of heating water and the rise of public washhouses, let's consider what you might wear during these various bathing experiences. Forget your skimpy modern swimwear or your au naturel approach at home. In Victorian times, even within the confines of a public bath cubicle or your private, makeshift bathing space, fashionable bathing attire was a consideration, dictated by the era's pervasive modesty and propriety. For women, especially in the public sphere of sea bathing or even at certain hydrotherapy establishments, full-body coverage was paramount. Imagine a heavy wool or serge bathing dress, a knee-length tunic worn over matching trousers that extended to the ankle. These garments, often dark blue or black to minimize transparency when wet, were certainly not designed for swimming laps. They became incredibly heavy when saturated, making any agile movement in the water quite challenging. You might even have seen pictures in fashion plates of women wearing small caps or turbans to keep their hair dry, an effort often futile against the waves. The aim was less about athletic performance and more about presenting a respectable, covered silhouette, even in the most unusual of circumstances. Why, darling, one simply must avoid any hint of indiscretion. Even when battling the mighty waves, a society lady might quip. In the privacy of your own home, while the strictures were slightly relaxed, complete nudity was still considered rather uncouth by many. You might simply wear a thin shift or camisole, or a loose, lightweight gown that could be easily shed once you were in the water. For gentlemen, the situation was similar. At public bathing beaches, men would wear full-body suits, often striped, with short sleeves and legs that extended to the knee or even mid-calf. Again, the emphasis was on covering as much skin as possible. In a private setting, a simple pair of drawers might suffice, or even nothing at all if you were truly alone and unobserved. The design of these bathing costumes reflects the era's deep-seated anxieties about the human body. Exposure, even of an ankle or a bare arm in certain contexts, could be seen as scandalous. This extended to the very act of entering and exiting the water, particularly at the seaside, leading to the bizarre invention of bathing machines, which we'll discuss later. These mobile changing rooms allowed bathers to be discreetly lowered into the water, completely avoiding the public gaze. It's almost comical how much effort went into not being seen. Even within the private bath at home, the concept of modesty was ingrained. That modesty screen we mentioned earlier wasn't just for blocking drafts, it was a psychological barrier, a small gesture towards decorum in a space that, to our eyes, already seems incredibly private. Historians still argue whether the extreme modesty in bathing attire was a genuine reflection of Victorian morality, or if it was a performative aspect of social class, demonstrating one's adherence to proper behavior. Whatever the underlying reason, you, as a Victorian, would find yourself navigating these unspoken rules, choosing your garments not just for comfort, but for the unspoken declarations they made about your character. As you settle deeper into the warmth of your bath, perhaps reaching for a bar of soap, let's turn our attention to these humble yet essential cleansing agents, the soaps and their origins. In the Victorian era, we're a far cry from the vast array of perfumed, moisturizing, and specialty bars you find on shelves today. These were workhorses, designed for efficacy rather than luxury, though luxury versions certainly existed for the discerning few. The most common soap you'd encounter, particularly in a public bath or a working-class home, would be yellow soap or carbolic soap. Yellow soap, as its name suggests, was a hard, often unscented bar made primarily from tallow animal fat and lye sodium hydroxide. It was effective at cutting through grime and grease, making it popular not just for personal washing, but also for laundry. Its smell was distinctly, well, soapy, with a faint, sometimes unpleasant animal fat aroma that would quickly fade once you were dry. Carbolic soap, on the other hand, had a much more pungent and memorable scent. It contained carbolic acid phenol, a powerful disinfectant. This soap was heavily promoted for its antiseptic properties, particularly in an age acutely aware of disease transmission. Even if the precise mechanisms were still being uncovered by pioneers like Joseph Lister, you'd recognize its strong, medicinal, almost clinical smell instantly. For some, it was the reassuring scent of cleanliness. For others, it was an astringent reminder of impending scrubbing. Nonsense, dear, a doctor might tell you. It simply means it's working. For those with more disposable income, or for special occasions, there were slightly more refined options. Transparent soaps, made with a higher proportion of glycerin, offered a gentler cleanse and often a more pleasant, if still subtle, fragrance, perhaps of rose or lavender. These were less common, more expensive, and often seen as a mark of sophistication. You might also find medicated soaps, beyond carbolic, infused with ingredients like sulfur or tar, prescribed for various skin ailments. These would often come with grand claims of curing everything from eczema to acne, though their effectiveness was often questionable. The process of making soap in Victorian times was still largely a traditional one, often involving large-scale industrial production using rendering plants for animal fats. While homemade soap was still a thing, especially in rural areas, mass-produced bars became increasingly available, standardizing quality and affordability. Historians still argue whether the widespread availability of cheap, effective soap played a more significant role in improving public health than advances in plumbing, by simply making daily washing more feasible for the masses. As you lather up, you'll notice the texture firm, often a little slick, and producing a decent, if not voluminous, lather. The feeling is one of purposeful cleansing, a robust scrub designed to remove the day's accumulations. There are no fancy moisturizers here, no exotic oils promising silky skin. This is about getting clean, thoroughly and efficiently. And as the scent of the soap mingles with the steam, you feel the grime of the Victorian world begin to lift, preparing you for the quieter, calmer moments after your weekly ablution. With the robust scent of carbolic or yellow soap lingering on your skin, Your thoughts might now turn to the delightful realm of post-bath indulgence, the not elaborate toiletries and perfumes that marked a lady or gentleman of taste and refinement. While the bath itself was often a practical affair, the aftermath allowed for a touch of luxury, a moment of self-adornment that transformed mere cleanliness into an art form. For women, the dressing table was a veritable altar of beauty. Imagine delicate glass bottles stoppered with ornate caps, holding fragrant eau de cologne, or manouan, lavender water. These weren't heavy, complex perfumes as we know them today, but lighter, more ethereal scents, designed to refresh and uplift. Rose water was also hugely popular, used as a gentle toner or a refreshing splash for the face. You might dab a little behind your ears, on your wrists, or even on a handkerchief tucked into your bodice. The aim was a subtle, pleasant aroma, not an overpowering cloud. One must never announce one's arrival by one's scent. Dear, a finishing school mistress might caution. Then there were the powders. Rice powder, or talcum powder, often lightly scented, was dusted onto the face and neck to absorb excess oil, create a smooth finish, and impart a subtle, matte complexion. You'd apply it with a soft puff, watching the fine dust settle. These powders weren't just for cosmetic effect. They also helped to create a barrier against the environmental grime of the day, a protective layer against the elements. For skincare, emollients were key. While heavy creams were less common for daily use, you might find small pots of a glycerin jelly or preparations containing lanolin, particularly for chapped hands or dry patches. The winter air, often harsh and drying, made these soothing balms essential. You might gently rub a small amount into your hands, feeling the relief as your skin absorbed the moisture. Gentlemen, too, had their rituals. After a close shave, another time-consuming ritual, often involving a straight razor, a splash of bay rum, or a bracing lavender water, would be applied. Hair pomades, often heavily scented with macassar oil or similar preparations, were essential for achieving those perfectly slicked back or precisely parted hairstyles. You would work a small amount through your hair, shaping it with a comb, the scent mingling with the faint lingering aroma of your bath soap. The containers themselves were often works of art, ornate silver-topped jars for pomades, cut glass bottles for lotions, and delicate ceramic dishes for soap fragments. These items were displayed proudly on dressing tables, speaking volumes about the owner's status and attention to personal refinement. Historians still argue whether the elaborate use of perfumes and cosmetics was primarily about masking body odor in an era of less frequent bathing, or if it was a genuine expression of Victorian aesthetic sensibilities and social aspiration. Whatever the precise motivations, these toiletries represented a bridge between the functional necessity of the bath and the desire for elegance and pleasantness. As you reach for a small bottle of lavender water, you feel a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the final touch transforms you, not just into a clean individual, but into one ready to face the world with a delicate, fragrant confidence. Emerging from your bath, perhaps slightly flushed from the warmth and the vigorous scrubbing, the next crucial garment you reach for isn't your day clothes. Oh no, that would be far too uncivilized. Instead, it's time to slip into the luxurious comfort of your dressing gown. This isn't merely a bathrobe. It's a statement of domestic relaxation, a symbol of transition from the demands of the public world to the sanctuary of your private abode. Imagine a garment crafted from rich, soft materials, perhaps a thick, quilted velvet for the wealthier classes, or a sturdy, warm flannel for those of more modest means. It's often ankle length, with wide sleeves and a generous tie belt. For gentlemen, these gowns were often quite opulent, sometimes lined with silk or adorned with braiding, evoking a sense of scholarly ease or a relaxed, aristocratic air. You might envision a scene from a Sherlock Holmes story, with the detective pondering clues in his favorite dressing gown, a pipe gently smoldering. For ladies, dressing gowns were equally elegant, though perhaps more understated. They might feature delicate lace trim on the cuffs or collar, or be made from soft challis or cashmere. The purpose was twofold: warmth, especially after a bath in a potentially chilly room; and propriety, even within the confines of your own home, especially if servants or other family members were present. Wandering around in anything less than a full dressing gown after bathing would be considered highly improper. It maintained a level of decorum, even in moments of intimate personal care. You wrap the soft fabric around you, feeling the comforting weight and warmth immediately. The rough texture of the bath towel is replaced by the smooth caress of the gown, a pleasant contrast that signals the end of the cleansing ritual and the beginning of relaxation. The scent of your chosen toiletries, subtly applied, now mingles with the clean smell of your freshly washed skin, creating a personal aura of freshness. The dressing gown also served a practical purpose. It allowed your skin to fully dry in a comfortable, unhurried manner, absorbing any residual dampness. There was no rush to squeeze into restrictive corsets or stiff collars immediately after a bath. This was a moment to breathe, to truly feel clean and unencumbered. It was an essential part of the post-bath ritual, allowing you to gradually transition from the warmth of the water to the ambient temperature of your home without catching a chill. One simply can't risk a vapor after a good soak. Can one, you might overhear a lady remark? Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of dressing gowns in the 19th century was purely a matter of fashion and comfort, or if it reflected a deeper cultural shift towards valorizing domesticity and private leisure. Regardless, for you, it's a moment of quiet indulgence. You might tie the belt, feeling perfectly secure and cozy, ready to settle by the fire with a book, or perhaps to simply drift off to sleep, enveloped in the soft embrace of your post-bath attire. Having now experienced the intimate details of a Victorian bath, let's broaden our perspective and consider a fascinating facet of this era: how social class and bathing era intersected, revealing stark differences in habits and access. Forget the modern notion of hygiene as a universal right. In Victorian England, cleanliness was often a clear, sometimes brutal indicator of one's position in the rigid social hierarchy. At the very top, the aristocracy and the wealthiest industrialists lived lives of unparalleled luxury. For them, a full-time staff of servants ensured that hot water was always available, perhaps even for daily bathing, especially towards the latter half of the century as plumbing advanced. Their homes might boast dedicated bathrooms, often lavishly appointed, with large, permanent bathtubs fed by rudimentary but functional pipe systems. While still a far cry from modern bathrooms, these were oases of personal hygiene. You might imagine a wealthy dowager being bathed by her maid, the air thick with steam and expensive floral scents. Their bathing was a private, pampered affair designed for comfort and ease. Moving down the social ladder to the burgeoning middle class, you encounter the kind of bathing rituals we've largely discussed: the weekly Saturday night bath, the portable tub, the concerted effort to heat water. While still a laborious process, it was manageable, a symbol of their comfortable, respectable status. They had the space, the resources, and the domestic help, even if it was just one maid of all work, to maintain a good standard of personal cleanliness, essential for maintaining their social standing. One simply cannot be seen with a spot of grime on one's collar. Not in polite society, a middle-class matron might declare. But then, you descend to the vast majority of the working classes, crammed into the industrial cities. Their reality was dramatically different. Homes, often just one or two rooms, lacked any form of plumbing. Water had to be fetched from a communal pump or standpipe, often shared by an entire street or tenement block. Heating water meant boiling it over a small, inefficient fire in a tiny grate, a process that consumed precious fuel. A dedicated bath was almost unheard of. People might use a communal wash tub, or simply wash in sections using a basin and sponge. Full immersion was a rare luxury, perhaps at a public bath if one could spare the penny. The smells of poverty were distinct and pervasive, a constant reminder of the lack of access to proper hygiene, unwashed clothes, stale air, the faint scent of human waste from overflowing privies. This wasn't a choice, it was a consequence of their living conditions. Historians still argue whether the class-based differences in hygiene perpetuated social stratification, or if it was simply a reflection of the economic realities of the time. What is undeniable, however, is that cleanliness, or the lack thereof, was a visible marker of one's place in Victorian society. You might observe a well-dressed gentleman recoiling slightly as he passes a group of factory workers, their faces smudged with soot, their clothes permeated with the smell of the mill. It wasn't just snobbery, it was a physical manifestation of two entirely different worlds coexisting in the same city. The simple act of bathing, therefore, was far from simple. It was woven into the very fabric of Victorian class distinctions, a silent yet powerful testament to who had access to comfort and who did not. Leaving the domestic sphere of individual baths, let's journey now to institutions that took water's perceived power to an entirely new level. The Ron Water Cure institutions, also known as hydropathic establishments or simply hydros. These were not just places to get clean. They were Victorian health resorts where hydrotherapy reigned supreme, promising cures for everything from nervous disorders to rheumatism, often attracting a clientele as diverse as it was desperate for relief. Imagine arriving at a grand, often imposing building nestled in a picturesque rural setting, far from the grime and stress of the industrial cities. Malvern in Worcestershire, England, was particularly famous for its hydros, drawing visitors from across the social spectrum. You might see invalids being wheeled in, alongside weary professionals seeking a restorative break, and even the occasional celebrity of the day. The air, crisp and clean, would be filled with the subtle sense of damp linen and perhaps a faint, medicinal tang. Your daily regimen at a hydro would be meticulously planned, overseen by a resident physician, often a stern-looking man with a firm belief in water's healing power. This wasn't a relaxing holiday, mind you. Your day might begin before dawn with a cold pack. A servant or attendant would swiftly wrap you in a sheet soaked in icy water, leaving you to shiver and then, hopefully, warm up from your own body heat. The sensation, you'd be told, was invigorating, stimulating the circulation and drawing out impurities. You might initially think, is this truly a cure, or just a very elaborate way to catch pneumonia? Then would come the various baths, not the gentle soaks we imagine, but often specialized treatments. There were Wassett's baths, those hip-shaped tubs administered with specific temperatures and durations, or spinal douches, where jets of water were directed at your back. You might be subjected to effusion, where buckets of cold water were poured over your head and body, or endure a sweating pack, where you were wrapped in warm, damp blankets until you perspired profusely, believed to cleanse the system. The diet at these establishments was often as austere as the treatments: plain, wholesome food, typically vegetarian, with plenty of fresh air and gentle exercise like brisk walks. Alcohol was strictly forbidden, as were rich foods and excessive stimulants. The emphasis was on a holistic approach to health, with water as the central therapeutic agent. Historians still argue whether the undeniable improvements many patients felt were due to the specific water treatments themselves, or simply the combined effect of fresh air, regulated diet, rest, and the psychological power of belief in the cure. You'd witness fellow patients, some looking pale and frail, others seemingly robust, undergoing these rigorous routines. There was a palpable sense of shared endurance, a camaraderie born from the communal shivering and steaming. It was a world where water was revered, almost deified, as the ultimate purifier and healer. And as you observed the various rituals, you might find yourself grudgingly admitting that, despite the discomfort, there was a certain logic to the simplicity of it all, a return to nature's remedies in an increasingly industrialized world. Following your immersion into the world of water cures, let's zoom in on one of the more intense, if somewhat uncomfortable, therapeutic practices favored by Victorian hydropaths, The sweating process. This wasn't merely breaking a light sweat from exertion. This was a deliberate, often prolonged induction of heavy perspiration, believed to be a powerful method of expelling toxins and curing a myriad of ailments. For you, the patient, it was less a spa treatment and more a carefully controlled, warm ordeal. Imagine yourself lying on a simple cot, perhaps in a room specially designed for this purpose, where the air is already thick with humidity. An attendant, often a stern-faced individual with practical hands, begins the process. You are thoroughly wrapped, often from neck to toe, in a series of layers. First, sheets that have been dipped in very hot water, perhaps even wrung out over steam. These are applied directly to your skin, feeling surprisingly warm, almost scalding, at first touch. For your humors, madam, the attendant might murmur, utterly serious. Over these hot, wet sheets, multiple layers of dry blankets are added, sometimes wool, sometimes flannel, creating an almost impenetrable cocoon. You are tucked in tightly, ensuring minimal air circulation, designed to trap every ounce of your body heat. The goal is to raise your core temperature slowly and steadily, forcing your pores to open and your body to perspire profusely. You're essentially being slow cooked. But for your health, of course, the sensation is initially one of oppressive warmth, then increasing heat, and finally a relentless, all-encompassing sweat. Beads of perspiration will begin to form on your forehead, trickle down your temples, and eventually drench your entire body. You might feel a prickling sensation on your skin, or a flush spreading across your face. The air around you, within your cocoon, becomes heavy, saturated with your own body heat and moisture. This process could last for a considerable amount of time, sometimes an hour or more, depending on the prescription of the hydropath. You would be encouraged to drink small sips of water, usually plain cold water, to prevent dehydration. But otherwise, your primary task was simply to lie still and sweat. The theory behind it was that the body could purge impurities, bad humors, and toxins through the skin, leaving you feeling lighter, cleaner, and ultimately healthier. Quirky tidbit. Some hydropaths even prescribe vapor baths or rudimentary steam cabinets where you'd sit with your head exposed, your body enveloped in hot steam. It was the Victorian equivalent of a sauna, but often less comfortable and more medically prescribed. Historians still argue whether the physiological benefits of these sweating processes were significant, or if they were largely psychological, making patients feel like they were undergoing a profound purification, which in itself could contribute to well-being. Regardless, as you lie there, feeling the warmth envelop you, you are participating in a historical health trend, a true testament to the Victorians' unwavering belief in the power of water, even when applied in its most extreme forms. Having sweated out your impurities and pondered the extreme end of Victorian hydrotherapy, let's now transition to something that, while still rudimentary, offered a glimpse into the future of domestic convenience: early plumbing innovations. While not as glamorous as public baths or elaborate water cures, the nascent development of indoor plumbing slowly, incrementally, began to transform the arduous process of bathing. You might be in a more affluent home now, perhaps one built in the latter half of the 19th century. Here, instead of buckets and boilers, you might encounter a cold water cistern in the attic, fed intermittently by a municipal supply or even a rainwater collection system. This cistern, a large, often lead-lined tank, provided the gravity feed for whatever limited indoor taps existed. The very concept of water flowing directly into your house was revolutionary, a profound step away from the laborious task of fetching every drop. However, flow is a relative term. These early systems were far from high pressure. You might turn a brass tap in a small scullery or lavatory, and a thin, sometimes sputtering stream of cold water would emerge. It was a marvel, certainly, but not designed for immediate satisfaction. Hot water, if available through plumbing, was even more limited. The most common hot water innovation was the Waback boiler. We mentioned earlier, a tank integrated into the kitchen range or a separate coal-fired boiler. This heated water would then circulate via thick, often external, lead or copper pipes to a single hot tap, typically near the kitchen. Imagine the pipework often exposed along walls, susceptible to freezing in winter, leading to burst pipes, a homeowner's nightmare, and prone to leaks. The concept of neatly concealed pipes within walls was largely a 20th century luxury. You might hear the distinctive clanking and groaning of these pipes as the water heated and expanded, a metallic symphony of Victorian engineering at work. For bathing, this meant a slight improvement. Instead of carrying all the water in buckets, you might now have a cold tap directly over your portable tub, requiring only the hot water to be transported, or in the truly cutting-edge homes of the 1880s and 90s. A dedicated bathroom with a permanent bathtub and both hot and cold taps was beginning to appear. These early fixed tubs were often made of cast iron, sometimes enameled, and typically stood on ornate feet. They were still massive, heavy affairs, a world away from the lighter materials of today. One of the biggest breakthroughs was the invention of the Aqueous water heater. Developed in the 1860s and refined through the end of the century, these ingenious devices allowed for on-demand hot water, bypassing the need for a continuously burning fire. Imagine turning a tap, lighting a gas jet, and hearing the reassuring roar as water began to heat almost instantly. This was a true game changer, transforming the bath from a major logistical event into a much more convenient, personal ritual. Historians still argue whether the invention of the flush toilet or the widespread adoption of hot running water had a greater impact on the average Victorian's daily hygiene and health. Both were certainly monumental steps. You might gaze at a rudimentary brass tap, its simplicity belying the immense effort and ingenuity that went into bringing water, cold or warm, directly into your home. It's a silent testament to a slow but undeniable revolution in domestic comfort. Even with the nascent whispers of indoor plumbing, the process of a proper Victorian bath remained a significant undertaking, one that often relied heavily on the tireless efforts of others. This brings us to a crucial, yet often unsung, aspect of domestic hygiene: the servant's role in bathing. For many middle and upper-class households, achieving cleanliness was a team effort, with household staff performing the most arduous tasks. Imagine yourself as the lady or master of the house. Your role in the bath ritual, beyond simply enjoying the end result, was largely one of direction. It was the housemaid or, for wealthier families, a dedicated lady's maid or valet who bore the brunt of the physical labor. Their day might begin hours before your actual bath time, initiating the process of preparing for your weekly ablution. Their duties were extensive and physically demanding. They would be the ones to stoke the kitchen range or light the coal-fired boiler to begin heating the vast quantities of water. Then came the endless parade of carrying heavy buckets, often dozens of them, from the heating source to your portable tub. You might hear the quiet padding of their footsteps on the stairs, the gentle clanking of metal pails, and the occasional soft grunt of effort as they maneuvered the scalding water. It was a delicate dance, requiring strength, balance, and patience, all performed with the utmost discretion. Once the water was in the tub, the servant's role often continued. They might carefully test the temperature, adding cooler water if it was too hot, or discreetly fetching another kettle if it had cooled too much. For ladies, a maid might even assist with the bathing itself, scrubbing one's back where it couldn't be reached, or pouring rinsing water over one's hair. This was a highly intimate service, a testament to the lack of personal boundaries between master and servant in many Victorian homes. You might find yourself chatting casually with your maid as she meticulously prepared your bath, discussing the day's trivialities, even as she performed this very personal task. After the bath, the servant's work was far from over. They would carefully drain the tub, often by pulling a stopper and allowing the water to flow into a waiting bucket, which then had to be carried outdoors and emptied. The tub itself then needed to be wiped down, dried thoroughly, and returned to its storage place. Towels and bath linen would be gathered for washing, another laborious process that would occur in the wash house or scullery. involving scrubbing boards and vast tubs of boiling water. This constant, demanding effort by domestic staff highlights a stark contrast between the perceived ease of Victorian life for the wealthy and the hidden labor that underpinned it. Historians still argue whether the reliance on servants for such personal tasks inhibited the development of more efficient self-serve plumbing in wealthy homes, or if it simply reflected the era's abundance of cheap labor. What is undeniable is that your sparkling cleanliness, as a Victorian of means, was a direct result of someone else's sweat and toil. The next time you turn a tap for hot water, spare a thought for the unseen hands that made it possible for your Victorian counterpart. Having acknowledged the silent labor that underpinned much of Victorian bathing, let's turn our attention to the star of your domestic hygiene show, the portable bathing tubs themselves. These weren't just simple basins, they were ingenious, if often cumbersome, solutions to the widespread lack of built-in bathrooms, showcasing a practical side of Victorian design. You've probably already pictured it, that large, often metallic vessel, appearing as if by magic for your weekly ablution. Typically, these tubs were made of galvanized iron or tin, materials chosen for their durability and relative affordability. They were designed to be robust, able to withstand repeated heating and cooling cycles, and the inevitable bumps and scrapes of being moved about the house. Imagine their weight, even empty, a substantial piece of metal, often with a rolled rim for comfort and perhaps even decorative feet, making them resemble miniature industrial sarcophagi. The portability was key, but it came with its own set of challenges. You or your servants would literally have to carry this tub from its storage place, perhaps the kitchen, a utility room, or even an outdoor shed, into the chosen bathing spot. This often meant navigating narrow doorways, steep stairs, and delicate furniture. You might recall the faint clang as it brushed against a wall, or the soft grunt of the person wrestling it into position. It was a physical exertion that immediately put you in mind of the effort involved in simply getting clean. These tubs came in various shapes and sizes, though most were designed for a seated or semi-reclined position rather than a full stretch. The hip bath was smaller, for washing the lower body, while the full slipper bath was larger, often enclosed at one end to allow you to recline more fully, somewhat resembling a giant, old-fashioned slipper. The slipper bath also had the added benefit of retaining heat better due to its enclosed design, a small mercy in a chilly Victorian room. My dear, the draft from that window simply chills one to the bone. But my slipper bath keeps me quite toasty, a lady might declare. Quirky tidbit: some of the more elaborate portable tubs were made of copper, polished to a gleaming finish, or even disguised with painted faux wood grain to blend in with furniture when not in use. This was an attempt to make a utilitarian object seem more aesthetically pleasing, a small concession to Victorian sensibilities in a world of practical necessity. Historians still argue whether the slow adoption of fixed indoor plumbing was more due to the high cost of installation or the ingrained habit of using these portable tubs which, for many, simply fulfilled the need adequately. Whatever the reasons, these heavy, versatile vessels were a ubiquitous sight in Victorian homes, silent witnesses to countless Saturday night ablutions. You might even feel a pang of sympathy for the poor soul who had to lug one of these around every week. Having discussed the sheer effort involved in heating and transporting water, and the weighty practicality of your portable tub, let's now plunge into one of the more bracing and, to modern sensibilities, perhaps terrifying aspects of Victorian hygiene and health: the embrace of cold baths for vigor. While warm baths offered comfort and cleanliness, the cold plunge was seen as a potent therapeutic tool, a shock to the system designed to invigorate, strengthen, and even cure. You might encounter this phenomenon at a hydrotherapy institution, as we briefly touched upon, where cold treatments were a cornerstone of the water cure. But even in private homes, particularly among gentlemen of a certain robust disposition, a daily cold bath or sponge down was advocated as a powerful tonic. The theory was that the sudden shock of cold water would stimulate circulation, tone the skin, and harden the body against illness. Nothing quite like a bracing cold dip to shake off the morning cobwebs. Eh? Old chap, a hearty Victorian gentleman might exclaim, looking alarmingly refreshed. Imagine the scene. It's early morning, perhaps a frosty winter day, and you stand shivering slightly as a servant or family member prepares a bucket of unheated, perhaps even icy water. There's no gentle easing in. This is a plunge, a quick, sharp immersion designed to be over quickly, but leave a lasting impression. You might brace yourself, take a deep breath, and then quickly lower yourself into the frigid depths of your portable tub. The initial shock is undeniable. A gasp, a tightening of the skin, every nerve ending screaming in protest. It's an immediate, visceral awakening, far more effective than any strong cup of tea. The feeling rapidly shifts from shock to an intense tingling sensation as your body fights to warm itself. Your skin flushes red, your heart rate quickens, and a rush of adrenaline floods your system. You emerge from the water quickly, perhaps rubbing yourself vigorously with a rough linen towel, the cold still clinging to your skin, but slowly giving way to a warm, tingling glow. This post-cold bath sensation was considered the true benefit, a feeling of heightened awareness, renewed energy, and mental clarity. It was a baptism by ice, a daily self-conquest. This practice was rooted in popular medical theories of the time, which often emphasized the balance of humors and the importance of tone in the body. Cold water was believed to tighten pores, strengthen blood vessels, and prevent various ailments caused by relaxing too much. Of course, modern medicine views these claims with a bit more skepticism, though the benefits of cold exposure for circulation and alertness are now being revisited with contemporary research. Historians still argue whether the widespread belief in cold baths for vigor was a genuine scientific conviction of the time, or a cultural phenomenon linked to Victorian ideals of self-discipline, resilience, and moral fortitude. Whatever its true physiological impact, for you, the Victorian, it was a deliberate act of embracing discomfort for the sake of perceived health, a challenging but ultimately rewarding start to the day. Leaving the bracing chill of the cold bath behind, let's transport ourselves to the coast, specifically to the beaches of Victorian England, where the desire for sea air and healthful dips met the era's unwavering commitment to modesty. Here, you'll encounter one of the most wonderfully quirky and uniquely Victorian inventions, the one bathing machine at the coast. Imagine a popular seaside resort like Brighton or Margate in the mid-19th century. The beach is bustling with families, promenaders, and perhaps a brass band playing jaunty tunes. The sun, if it deigns to shine in typical British fashion, casts a pleasant glow, but conspicuously absent are any exposed bathers frolicking in the waves. Oh no, that would be scandalous. Victorian sensibilities dictated that bodies, especially female bodies, should remain as covered as possible, even when engaging in the seemingly innocent act of sea bathing. Enter the bathing machine, essentially a small, wooden hut on wheels, often painted in cheerful stripes or a plain, sturdy color. You would rent one of these contraptions for a small fee. Your journey begins by entering the machine on the beach. Inside, it functions as a private changing room. You would disrobe from your street clothes and don your voluminous wool or serge bathing costume. Remember those heavy, full-body garments we discussed. Once changed, the real magic, or rather, the meticulous choreography of modesty begins. A horse, or sometimes a team of sturdy attendants, would then draw the bathing machine, with you still inside, directly into the shallow waters of the sea. The machine would be pulled until the water was deep enough for a dip, usually up to chest height, effectively concealing your entry and exit from the prying eyes of those on the beach. Some machines even had a small set of steps leading directly into the water from the door, sometimes accompanied by a canvas awning or modesty hood for even greater concealment. You would then emerge from the machine, perform a quick dip, often assisted by a dipper, a strong female attendant who would literally dunk you into the waves, sometimes rather unceremoniously, if you were a lady, and then swiftly retreat back into the machine. The whole process was designed to ensure that your body, particularly a female, was never fully exposed to public view. It was an almost comical display of prudishness, a theatrical performance of propriety. One simply cannot be seen in a state of nature, even by a crab. Darling, you might hear a society lady declare with a flutter of her fan. Historians still argue whether the bathing machine was primarily a reflection of genuine Victorian prudery or a practical solution to facilitate sea bathing for those who desired it while still adhering to prevailing social norms. Regardless, these charmingly absurd inventions were a ubiquitous sight at seaside resorts for decades, a testament to an era where even the simple pleasure of a swim in the sea was meticulously managed for the sake of decorum. They began to decline in popularity only towards the very end of the century and into the Edwardian era, as societal attitudes softened and the practicality of direct access to the water slowly outweighed the need for such elaborate concealment. You might find yourself smiling at the image, a vivid reminder of a bygone era's unique approach to public leisure and personal modesty. From the peculiar privacy of bathing machines, let's delve deeper into a pervasive anxiety that shaped many aspects of Victorian life, including hygiene, the moral debates on nudity. This wasn't just about covering up at the beach. It was a deeply ingrained societal discomfort with the exposed human body, a prudishness that touched everything from art to medicine and certainly influenced bathing practices. You see, the Victorian era, particularly its middle and upper classes, was characterized by a strong emphasis on morality, decorum, and strict social codes. The body, especially the naked body, was seen as inherently linked to sensuality and, by extension, to sin and moral corruption. This wasn't simply a matter of personal preference. It was a widely accepted cultural norm, enforced through social pressure, religious teachings, and even legislation concerning public decency. Imagine how this impacted something as fundamental as a bath. While you might be alone in your portable tub, the very idea of complete nakedness was often met with a subconscious unease. This is partly why shifts or thin garments were sometimes worn even in private baths, or why privacy screens were considered essential. It was about maintaining a sense of decency, even in solitude. The mere thought of a fleeting glimpse of skin, especially of the opposite sex, could induce a fit of the vapors in a particularly delicate lady. Good heavens, Bertha. Did you just see Aunt Mildred's ankle when she stood up? The sheer audacity you might overhear. This aversion to nudity extended far beyond the bathroom. In art, classical nudes were often considered problematic and sometimes censored or viewed with suspicion. Anatomical drawings in medical texts were often heavily idealized or presented in a way that minimized direct exposure. Even children's bath time, as we'll see, was often conducted with a pragmatic, almost clinical approach, rather than a playful one that might encourage body awareness. The underlying reasoning for this pervasive prudishness is complex. It was influenced by evangelical religious revivals, which stressed modesty and sin avoidance. It was also a reaction to the perceived licentiousness of earlier periods, and a way for the rising middle class to differentiate themselves from what they considered the vulgarity of the lower classes. Historians still argue whether this widespread aversion to nudity led to psychological repression or if it fostered a heightened appreciation for the clothed form and the power of suggestion. You might find it fascinating, or perhaps a little suffocating, this constant preoccupation with covering up. The very notion of a public swimming pool where people wear minimal clothing would be utterly unthinkable, a concept that would send shivers down the spine of any respectable Victorian. This pervasive sense of unease around the naked body, even in the context of cleanliness, serves as a stark reminder of how deeply cultural norms can shape even the most private and personal aspects of human existence. It wasn't just about modesty, it was about maintaining a moral fortress against perceived societal decay, one carefully draped limb at a time. Having navigated the intricate moral landscape of Victorian modesty, let's now peek into a less dramatic, but equally telling, aspect of bathing life: children's bath time. Far from the brightly colored rubber ducks and bubble bath mountains of today, a Victorian child's ablution was a simpler, often shared, and highly practical affair, reflecting both the era's sensibilities and its resourcefulness. For most families, especially those with several offspring, the Saturday night bathing routine would inevitably conclude with the children. Imagine the scene: the water in the portable tub, already used by the parents, would be considerably cooler and, let's be honest, quite a bit murkier. But waste was not an option. The youngest child would usually go first, followed by siblings in ascending order of age, perhaps based on who was deemed cleanest or dirtiest by their parents. A rather dubious distinction. Right. Little Edmund, in you go. You haven't been playing in the muck heap all day. Have you? Your mother might inquire with a wry smile. The tub might be set up in the warmest spot in the house, perhaps near the kitchen range. For smaller children, a large basin placed on a sturdy stool might suffice, allowing an adult to comfortably wash them without straining. The bathing implements were simple: a rough linen washcloth, a bar of plain yellow or carbolic soap, its strong scent perhaps tolerated for its perceived germ-killing properties, and a couple of pitchers for rinsing. There were no elaborate toys or playful distractions. The goal was efficiency and thoroughness. The washing itself was brisk and functional. A quick scrub, a splash of water, and out you came, wrapped in a coarse towel, probably shivering slightly but quickly bundled into warm nightclothes. This practical approach underscored the idea that bathing was a necessity, a means to an end, rather than a leisure activity. Parents were concerned with hygiene, of course, but also with discipline and efficiency in managing a household with limited resources. Quirky tidbit: while dedicated children's bath toys were rare, household items often found their way into the tub. A simple wooden block, a tin cup, or even a scrubbing brush might become a temporary plaything, transforming the mundane into a moment of fleeting amusement. Historians still argue whether the less frequent bathing of children, compared to our modern standards, contributed to higher rates of childhood skin conditions, or if the overall hardiness of Victorian children, exposed to more microbes from a young age, made them more resilient. Regardless, the simplicity of a Victorian child's bath time stands in stark contrast to the often elaborate, child-focused bathing rituals of today. It was a no-nonsense approach to cleanliness, preparing the young ones for their Sunday best and, implicitly, for the structured demands of Victorian life. Having observed the rather pragmatic approach to children's bath time, let's now turn our attention to the unsung heroes of the scrubbing process. The role of sponges. Forget the soft, brightly colored synthetic sponges of your modern bathroom. In the Victorian era, these tools were organic, utilitarian, and deeply connected to natural sources, each with its own specific purpose and texture. The most common and perhaps most effective scrubbing tool you'd use was a natural sea sponge. Imagine a fibrous, porous, irregularly shaped marine organism, dried and prepared for personal hygiene. These weren't perfectly uniform. Each one had its unique contours, allowing it to adapt to the curves of the body. You would hold it in your hand, feel its slight compressibility, and appreciate its ability to hold a good amount of water and generate a decent lather from your hard bar of soap. Sea sponges were prized for their absorbency and their gently abrasive texture. They were firm enough to provide a good scrub, effectively lifting dirt and grime, yet soft enough not to scratch the skin. You'd probably have a specific sponge for your body, perhaps a finer, softer one for your face, and a rougher one still for cleaning the tub itself after your bath. This division of labor, even among sponges, speaks to the meticulous nature of Victorian cleanliness. Beyond sea sponges, other natural materials might be employed. Rough linen washcloths were ubiquitous, often made from unbleached flax. These were durable, cheap, and offered a more vigorous scrub than a soft sponge. You might even find specialized loofah sponges, derived from a type of gourd, particularly for exfoliating rougher skin or for stimulating circulation. These were coarser than sea sponges, providing a truly invigorating, almost scratchy sensation. A good rub down with a loofah will chase away any lingering chill. Darling, an older relative might advise. The care of these sponges was also important. After each use, a natural sponge would need to be thoroughly rinsed to remove all soap residue and then hung to dry in a well-ventilated area to prevent mildew and prolong its life. This simple act of maintenance was part of the broader economy of household goods. Nothing was casually discarded. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of natural sponges contributed to a greater understanding of marine ecosystems, or if their harvesting practices inadvertently led to early forms of environmental impact. Regardless, these humble tools were indispensable. You'd feel the subtle parchment texture of the manuscript as your mind conjures the image of a hand gripping a rough, natural sponge, working up a lather. The scent of damp sponge, mingled with carbolic soap and steam, would fill the air. It's a sensory experience far removed from the smooth, uniform feel of modern synthetics, connecting you directly to the natural world that provided the very tools for your cleanliness. These simple yet effective instruments played a vital role in the weekly ritual of shedding the week's grime, leaving you feeling truly, organically clean. As the last traces of bathwater drain from your portable tub and the rough linen towels have done their duty, the bath ritual doesn't abruptly end. Instead, you enter a phase of quiet luxury, a moment of repose dedicated to post-bath pampering. These weren't elaborate spa treatments, but rather small, accessible comforts that underscored the sense of refreshed well-being after such a laborious cleansing. Imagine the room, now infused with the lingering warmth and humidity from the bath. The air carries faint notes of soap and perhaps the subtle fragrance of your chosen toiletries. You might wrap yourself more snugly in your dressing gown, feeling the soft fabric against your freshly cleansed skin. This is the moment for true absorption, for your body to fully adjust to its renewed state. One of the simplest, yet most effective, forms of pampering was the application of simple emollients. Your hands, perhaps chapped from daily chores or the harsh winter air, would welcome a gentle rub with glycerin jelly or a similar soothing balm. You'd feel the immediate relief as the skin softened, a small act of self-care. For your face, a splash of rose water or lavender water might be dabbed on, its cool touch refreshing and its delicate scent uplifting. This wasn't about heavy makeup or complex skincare routines. It was about soothing and protecting. For gentlemen, the post-bath ritual might involve a meticulous shave, followed by a bracing splash of bay rum or a cologne, leaving the skin feeling invigorated. Then came the application of hair pomade, worked carefully through the hair to achieve the desired slickness and style, its distinctive scent adding to the overall aura of freshness. The care dedicated to one's appearance after the bath was a mark of respectability, a final polish to the week's cleansing efforts. You might find yourself simply sitting by the dying embers of the fire, or near a window if the weather allowed, feeling the cool air against your face. There's a quiet satisfaction in this moment, a sense of deep, personal cleanliness that contrasts sharply with the pervasive dust and grime of the outside world. This isn't just about feeling clean, it's about feeling light, unburdened by the week's physical accumulation. Historians still argue whether the growth of the cosmetic and toiletry industry in the Victorian era was driven by a genuine desire for personal care and fragrance, or if it was largely fueled by advertising and the aspiration for middle-class gentility. Whatever the primary driver, these small luxuries provided a crucial bridge between the utilitarian act of bathing and the desire for personal comfort and refinement. You might find yourself reaching for a book, or simply closing your eyes, savoring the feeling of profound cleanliness, a rare and precious commodity in your Victorian world. The quiet hum of the night outside seems to lull you, amplifying the sense of peace within your freshly bathed self. As the gentle afterglow of your bath fades into the evening, let's consider a significant shift that began to take hold towards the end of the Victorian era and into the early 20th century. The decline of home baths. As a mobile, laborious event, and the steady rise of the dedicated, fixed bathroom. This wasn't a sudden revolution, but a slow, infrastructural transformation that fundamentally altered daily hygiene. You see, for decades, the portable tub and the weekly ritual had been the norm. But as the century wore on, advancements in urban planning, public sanitation, and especially domestic plumbing began to make the old ways seem increasingly cumbersome. The spread of municipal water supplies, delivering clean water directly to homes, was a huge leap forward. No more fetching water from the pump or the street tap. This meant a more consistent and accessible supply, paving the way for permanent fixtures. The development of the gas water heater, which we touched upon earlier, was a true game changer. Imagine the luxury of turning a tap and having hot water immediately, without the hours of stoking a fire and boiling kettles. This innovation alone began to make the laborious process of preparing a bath far less daunting, encouraging more frequent washing. My dear, the amount of time I save not having to supervise the boiler is simply divine, a lady of leisure might exclaim. Builders and architects also started to recognize the demand for dedicated bathing spaces. Instead of a room that temporarily became a bathroom, new homes, particularly those for the burgeoning middle and upper middle classes, began to incorporate a specific room for hygiene. This dedicated bathroom often featured a permanent cast iron bathtub, sometimes with enamel coating, connected directly to hot and cold running water. It was often a compact space, perhaps with a basin known as a washstand and, increasingly, a flush toilet, a further testament to the era's growing focus on sanitation. The reasons for this shift were multifaceted. There was a continued growing awareness of germ theory and the importance of hygiene for public health. Doctors and public health officials advocated for cleaner living conditions. There was also the sheer convenience factor. Why go through the arduous weekly ritual when technology could make daily cleanliness so much easier? And of course, there was the undeniable allure of modernity, the desire for the latest conveniences that marked one as progressive and well-to-do. Historians still argue whether the decline of the portable home bath was primarily driven by technological advancements or by a shifting social preference for greater privacy and individual hygiene that the fixed bathroom offered. Whatever the precise impetus, the days of lugging heavy tubs and countless buckets were slowly, steadily drawing to a close. You might find yourself observing the arrival of a sleek, white enameled tub in a neighbor's newly built home, feeling a faint pang of both envy and anticipation for the coming era of easier, more personal cleanliness. The future of bathing was literally being plumbed into existence. As the portable tub began its slow retreat from the center of domestic life, a new and powerful symbolism emerged around personal bathing. It became inextricably linked with home bathing as social status. No longer merely a functional necessity, the possession of a permanent, dedicated bathroom and the implied ability to indulge in frequent, effortless baths evolved into a profound marker of prosperity and refinement. You see, for decades, the working classes relied on communal pumps, shared facilities, and the penny public bath. Their homes simply lacked the infrastructure for private, at-will bathing. So when piped water, and especially piped hot water, became more accessible, it wasn't just a convenience, it was a visible statement. To have a gleaming, permanent bathtub, a flushing toilet, and a wash basin, all within the confines of your own home, immediately signaled that you had arrived. My dear, the Johnsons have installed a proper bathroom with actual taps you might overhear at a tea party, the hushed tones conveying a mixture of admiration and thinly veiled envy. This wasn't just about showing off. It reflected real economic standing. Installing modern plumbing was an expensive undertaking, requiring skilled labor and significant investment in pipes, fixtures, and often a dedicated water heater. Only those with disposable income could afford such upgrades or purchase newly built homes already equipped with these luxuries. Therefore, while the very existence of a private bathroom in a Victorian home became a tangible manifestation of wealth, a quiet boast of financial security. Furthermore, the ability to bathe frequently and privately contributed to an overall appearance of cleanliness and freshness that was highly valued in polite society. You could always tell the difference between someone who had access to daily ablutions and someone who did not. A crisp collar, clean hands, and a subtle absence of pervasive grime were all subtle cues that you moved in circles where such standards were maintained. It wasn't just about being clean, it was about appearing effortlessly clean, a sign that you transcended the grimy realities of industrial life. Historians still argue whether the drive for individual private bathrooms was primarily a response to genuine public health concerns about shared facilities, or if it was more about the emerging middle-class desire for greater personal privacy and a more exclusive domestic sphere. It was likely a blend of both. The idea of personal space, separate from servants and even family members for such intimate acts, gained traction. The bathroom became a sanctuary, not just for hygiene, but for individual retreat. You might find yourself walking through a newly built middle-class dwelling, peering into the compact, often somewhat chilly, room designated as the bathroom. It might seem simple to your modern eyes, but for a Victorian, it represented the pinnacle of domestic comfort and status. It was a tangible step towards a more private, more sanitary future, solidifying the idea that a clean body was not just a matter of health, but a hallmark of a respectable and prosperous life. As the last whispers of our journey through Victorian bathing rituals fade, you are left with the lingering, almost ethereal sensation of lingering sense of cleanliness. This isn't the heavy perfume of a modern luxury product, but something far more subtle, more elemental, and deeply satisfying. It's the quiet aftermath of a laborious, yet profound act of self-purification in an era where true cleanliness was hard-won. Imagine the gentle aroma of the rough linen towel that just dried you, its fibers having absorbed the last vestiges of moisture and mingled with the faint, medicinal scent of carbolic soap. It's not an unpleasant smell. Rather, it's the honest, unadorned fragrance of being truly scrubbed clean. Perhaps you catch a delicate wisp of lavender from the scented water you dabbed on your pulse points, a fleeting, floral whisper that counters the more robust notes of the soap. Your skin feels taut and refreshed, perhaps a little tingly from the vigorous application of the sea sponge. There's a lightness to your limbs, a subtle feeling of renewal as if the week's accumulated dust, both literal and metaphorical, has finally been sloughed away. This isn't just a sensory experience, it's a profound physical sensation, a quiet satisfaction that permeates your very being. You're not just clean on the surface, you feel clean right down to your bones. The air in the room, still faintly humid from the bath, begins to cool, and with it, the pervasive dampness slowly dissipates. The crackle of the dying fire in the hearth provides a gentle counterpoint to the silence, amplifying the feeling of warmth and security within your private space. You might find yourself simply sitting, perhaps wrapped in your dressing gown, a deep sense of contentment washing over you. There's no rush, no immediate demand for your attention. This is a moment of quiet personal triumph, a reward for the considerable effort expended. This unique post-bath tranquility, achieved through such deliberate means, fostered a deeper appreciation for the state of cleanliness itself. It was a condition that had to be earned, not simply expected, and because it was earned, it was savored. Historians still argue whether the Victorians' infrequent but thorough bathing rituals led to a more profound psychological connection to the act of purification, compared to the more casual daily showers of today. What is clear, however, is that for you, the Victorian, this sensation of pristine cleanliness was a cherished commodity, a fleeting moment of perfection in a world often defined by its grittiness. As the scent of clean linen and faint soap settles around you, the dim light of the gas lamp begins to blur at the edges, and the gentle hum of the evening outside becomes a soothing lullaby. You feel the weight of the day lift, replaced by a profound lightness. The very air around you feels softer, cleaner, a reflection of your own renewed state. The subtle parchment texture under your fingers reminds you of the delicate artistry of the past, now almost indistinguishable from the soft blankets you might pull closer. The sounds of the Victorian night, perhaps a distant hansom cab. The soft sigh of the wind blend into a single, calming whisper. You are clean, truly clean, in a way that modern ease rarely allows. Let that feeling envelop you, a gentle wave of serenity. The historical journey is complete, and all that remains is the profound calm of a world cleansed. Sweet dreams.